I came home long after dark, the sky pressed flat and empty above the quiet street. The front door protested with a low groan as I unlocked it, a sound so familiar it was almost comforting. Inside, the house was empty still. My footsteps echoed too loudly in the narrow hallway. I tossed my bag onto the counter in the kitchen and immediately noticed it. It was lying there, in the center of the kitchen table, as though it had been waiting for me all day. My old diary, the leather cover, scarred and soft from years of handling, gleamed faintly in the overhead light. I froze, hand hovering above it, because I knew I had burned it. The fire had swallowed it whole, or at least that was what I remembered. The smell hit me before anything else. A faint, acrid scent of scorched paper, almost imperceptible, as if the smoke had never left the house but had settled into the walls and furniture. My fingers trembled when I touched it. The cover was smooth, warm under my skin, as if it had been waiting for my touch. I opened it. The pages were intact, unburned, their edges crisp and clean. The ink gleamed black against the paper, some of it still wet, glistening faintly in the dim light. I flipped through the pages, expecting the familiar entries from my teenage years. Instead, I found writing I did not remember. I walked down the street at midnight, feeling eyes on my back. I blinked, my pulse tightening. I had never written that. Not in that tone. Not with that certainty. The diary chronicled things I thought I had erased from memory, events I had buried deep, conversations I had never spoken aloud, thoughts I hadn't dared to articulate. I remembered the fire. I could see it clearly. The roaring heat, the flames licking the edges of the diary, the black smoke curling into the night. I had burned it to forget, yet here it was whole, untouched. I tried to laugh, to rationalize it. Maybe I had imagined the fire. Maybe I'd left it somewhere safe and forgotten. But as I turned the pages, a deeper unease settled in. The entries began to shift before my eyes. Words rearranged themselves, sentences forming as if responding to my thoughts. She is afraid. She knows the truth. My breath caught. I had not written that. And yet it was true. I was afraid. My mind felt slippery, like water running over smooth stones, memories dissolving into something else. I tried to shut the diary, to throw it aside, but it seemed to cling to my gaze, beckoning me. The handwriting changed subtly as I watched, looping and curling in ways that made my stomach twist. My name appeared, written in a script I did not recognize, as if the pen knew me better than I knew myself. I flipped backward, seeking familiarity, but every entry had been rewritten, reflecting events I knew hadn't happened, or perhaps hadn't yet happened. You will pour the tea now, as always. I froze. My hands were moving, against my will, reaching for the kettle. Steam hissed as I poured, and the cup clinked against the saucer with a sound too loud in the silence. The diary lay open before me, pages fluttering as if breathing. I thought I saw shadows moving at the edges of my vision, shapes that didn't belong to the furniture or the angle of the light. The air grew heavier, warmer, as though the house itself was pressing closer, watching. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion had fractured my perception. But the diary knew. It knew the thoughts I had not spoken, the fears I had not admitted even to myself. I forced myself to read on. The entries became predictive, almost conversational. You are thinking about your childhood bedroom. You remember the attic. You cannot sleep. Goosebumps crawled over my arms. I had been thinking about the attic all evening, dreading the night. I had planned to avoid it, but the diary anticipated me, detailing my intentions, reading my mind with unnerving accuracy. I wanted to tear it apart, set it on fire again, but I could not. My fingers traced the leather, and the pages whispered under my touch, rewriting themselves. Every time I tried to close it, the book seemed to expand, stretching beyond the edges of the table, the handwriting pressing closer, more insistent. She burned me once. She will not burn me again. The words made me stumble back. The diary, the fire, my memory, everything collided into confusion. I remembered again, fragments of the blaze. the smoke curling around my face, my hands blackened, the heat biting my skin. I had burned it. I had believed it gone. And yet, here it was whole, patient, waiting. The room was silent, but I could hear something. My heartbeat? Or something else, slower, resonating beneath the floorboards. The diary seemed to pulse in response, as if alive, attuned to my fear, to my hesitation. I sank into the chair, trying to rationalize, to remind myself of the impossible logic. Diaries do not move, do not rewrite, do not think. But the ink twisted, letters reshaping themselves to mock my skepticism. I could read sentences, then the words would shift, forming new ideas, new thoughts, ones I did not recognize as my own. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You belong here to me. I felt the room constrict, the familiar contours of the kitchen. The table, the counter, the sink seemed slightly off, angled in ways that made me dizzy. I blinked, and the diary was closer than before. Its presence pressed into my vision, ink glinting like wet obsidian, breathing against my awareness. I tried to leave, to step away, but my legs did not obey. They moved toward the table of their own volition. I felt my hand brush against the cover, warm and insistent, and then I realized, with a sudden, sickening clarity, that it was not my diary anymore. I was holding something else entirely, something patient, something that had learned me while I was asleep, while I had thought myself alone. It remembered every secret, every fear, every unspoken thought. It knew me better than I knew myself, and it had been waiting. The final entry, written in letters I had never formed, spelled itself out as I stared, frozen. You are hers, but you will be mine. We have always been together. I tried to speak, tried to scream, but my voice did not answer me. The diary shifted in my hands, the pages rustling like the wings of a bird trapped in a jar. I felt my identity splintering, memory unspooling. The handwriting watched me, a living presence, and I understood at last. I had never truly owned the diary. It had always owned me. The night stretched on, silent and oppressive. I sat at the kitchen table, the diary open before me, and I realized I was no longer entirely myself. Each thought I thought, each memory I remembered, had already been anticipated, rewritten, absorbed by something older, something patient. The house itself seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting, as I trembled in my chair. And in the quiet, I understood. It wasn't that the diary remembered me. I had become a part of it. The attic stairs descended farther than the house should allow. At first, I thought it was the angle of the dim light, the single bulb swinging above the narrow stairwell, casting long, restless shadows on the plaster walls. But as I leaned closer, my fingers brushing the chipped railing, I realized the drops stretched into impossible depths. The air smelled wrong. Damp, stale, faintly acidic, like old ink soaked into wet fabric. It tugged at the back of my throat, pressing against my lungs with every shallow breath. I had come home late from work, the streets empty beneath the thick fog outside. The house was quiet in that suffocating way it sometimes became at night, when the familiar rooms seemed to exhale in unison. I didn't remember leaving the attic door unlocked. My apartment, or rather the house I'd inherited, was small, 3 floors stacked tightly on a narrow plot of land. The attic should have been no more than a single low-ceilinged storage space, dusty boxes stacked in haphazard pyramids, the remnants of my parents' lives. Yet the stairwell yawned downward like a mouth. I stood at the top, hesitant. My fingers lingered on the railing, rough with splintered wood, my eyes tracing the black spiral that seemed to go on and on. My feet itched to move, as if the stairs themselves were a lure, pulling me with a gravity that was not mine. The thought should have been absurd. Stairs do not descend forever. But in that moment, logic felt distant, and my heartbeat thudded against my ribs in a rhythm both urgent and resigned. The first step creaked beneath my weight. A high, whining groan echoed upward, and the shadows along the walls seemed to twist in response. I swallowed hard. The light from above did not fade, and yet, somehow, the stairwell deepened. With each step, the walls narrowed slightly, pressing closer to my sides, the railing cold and slick as though coated in condensation. The air grew thicker, dragging at my lungs. It was no longer just damp. It was viscous, clinging to my skin, whispering through my hair. I shivered, though sweat was running down my spine. I should have turned back. But a voice, a thought, not audible yet, urged me onward. Not curiosity, not fear exactly. Something deeper, more personal. The kind of pull you feel in your chest when you've forgotten the very thing you've lost. I descended another step, and then another. With each tread, the house changed. The floorboards beneath my feet were no longer uniform planks. They were warped, hollowed, as if the house were exhaling beneath me. Occasionally, I saw glimpses of rooms I didn't recognize. A dining room where the wallpaper pulsed slightly. A living room with a mirror reflecting a version of myself I did not know. The faces were mine but distorted, younger, older, sometimes both in the same flicker. And always watching. A memory, fragmented and sharp, flitted at the edges of my mind. I was a child again, hiding in this very attic during a storm, the floor trembling beneath a downpour that was only in my head. The walls smelled of pine and varnish, of old paper and damp cloth. And I was not alone. I could feel someone or something hovering just beyond the shadows, waiting, patient. I wanted to call out, but my voice felt trapped, thickened like tar. The stairs continued downward. I no longer saw the end. My footfalls made no sound, though each step pressed deeper into a void I did not understand. The walls now seemed to pulse in rhythm with my own heartbeat, contracting, expanding. I reached out to touch the plaster. It gave beneath my fingers, soft and almost fluid. I recoiled, but my curiosity was relentless. I began to notice the subtle distortions in myself. My reflection, when glimpsed in the shards of broken mirrors or the faint glints of light along the walls, was not quite right. My eyes were too dark, or too bright, or shifting in shade with each blink. My hands sometimes seemed longer than they should be, fingers curling unnaturally. And yet, I could not stop. I had to descend. Time stretched. Minutes became hours, or hours became seconds. I could not tell. The smell of the air shifted again, metallic now, like blood yet not blood. My ears rang faintly with a whispering, indistinct at first, but growing. A voice reciting my thoughts, my memories, twisting them. The voice knew things I had not consciously remembered, things buried under decades of habit and forgetfulness. I stepped into a room, or what I thought was a room. There were no walls, only a vast blackness that seemed to fold in on itself. And yet, the space felt intimate, familiar, like the hollow of a chest. Shapes swirled in the darkness. Furniture I had owned, objects I had touched, faces I had loved. They swam toward me, dissolving as I reached for them. Then I saw it. A fragment of my earliest memory, clearer than any other. A crib, a small blanket, the sound of lullabies that I could never place. But it was wrong in a way that set my teeth on edge. I had never been here. I had no memory of it existing in the house. And yet, it felt like me, like something intrinsic to my being, not merely a fragment of my life. The realization hit slowly, a creeping understanding that settled in my bones. The attic was not part of the house. It had never been. The house was a shell, a frame. The stairs, the rooms, the walls, they were extensions of me. My mind, my memory, my fears made manifest. The deeper I descended, the more I understood. I was exploring myself, peeling back layers, seeing the architecture of my own consciousness in 3 dimensions. The walls whispered. They whispered my doubts, my regrets, my unspoken terrors. Shadows twisted into the faces of people I had loved and lost, and each one whispered something different. Some forgiveness, some accusation, some indifference. I felt every past mistake, every hidden desire, every unacknowledged fear, pressing in. The stairs were endless because I was endless, and each step was a step into the raw core of myself. I tried to turn back, to climb upward, to escape, but the railing was gone. replaced by smooth nothingness. The steps beneath me were insubstantial, hollowed by some internal gravity I could not oppose. The air was denser, thicker, now filled with a buzzing that thrummed directly in my skull. I realized that the house above, the kitchen, the bedrooms, the living spaces were irrelevant. They had never mattered. The attic was all that existed, all that had ever existed. I reached a landing, or something resembling one, and collapsed, knees on the warped boards. The shadows settled around me, pressing in, yet not threatening. They were patient, waiting for comprehension. I understood finally. The attic had always been a mirror, a map, and a cage. The house had given me the illusion of separation, the illusion of safety. But the real architecture, the true shape, was internal. I was inside the attic was inside me. A door appeared, framed in darkness, impossibly small yet perfectly scaled. It beckoned. I felt it not just as a sight, but as a pull on my very self. I could not resist. As I stepped forward, the floorboards stretched into a spiral that seemed to fold the very air around me. My hands met the door, warm and soft, and the shadows drew closer. Not to harm, but to fold me in, to absorb me completely. And then I understood. The attic was never a place I could leave. It had always been here, within me, waiting for the moment when I could see it for what it truly was. A part of me that I could neither abandon nor escape. The door opened, and I stepped inside. The darkness embraced me, familiar and infinite. The house above, the streets outside, the life I thought I had lived. They were echoes, illusions. The attic was the only reality, and I was nothing more than its inhabitant, forever descending, forever unraveling, forever known. The air pressed in. My shadow, if I had one, had already left me behind. And for the first time in years, I was certain of something. The attic was not a space I entered. The attic had always been part of me, and I belonged to it.